8:15 now. Steve, if you have one more question, we're at 8:15. We might want to start winding up and let these folks get on home.
I just have one question. We had great success this last election cycle in North Carolina due to the people in this room, the people that are sitting here in front of me, people throughout the state going above and beyond what they've done before for success. The only issue I see is the Council of State races. We picked up a big one in Danforth. We held two, and we didn't do well in the other ones, even though we had great candidates. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure the state party did everything they could and should have done in the Council of State races. And the Council of State is just not a body that sits out there and doesn't do anything. I think, my understanding is that they do set economic policy and decisions, allocate and process tax money. For example, the insurance commissioner is one of the most important economic positions in the state. A lot of people don't realize how much money, how many things the insurance commissioner does. Anyway, what do y'all think that needs to be done for something like that? Well, I mean, we didn't even field a candidate for Attorney General. I still don't understand that. But anyway, do y'all have anything to add about that?
Okay.
Well, I can only speak to it from an outsider's perspective because I was in no way a party to any of those discussions, deliberations, or decisions that were made. I can tell you that as an advocate out in the field helping Ed Goodwin in his campaign, that I drove down twice to his farm with my camera and made a commercial for him, something he would have probably had to pay a couple $1,000s to do. And granted, it wasn't a studio grade commercial, but it got the man's message out there. We put it on YouTube, got him several thousand views for the cost of a tank of gas. Oh, and just to be clear, he paid me to do that commercial. 2 bags of peanuts out of his field. If you look at that commercial and see him up on the trailer with a plastic bag filled with peanuts, he paid me 2 bags of peanuts for making that commercial. Folks, that's one of the ways we can get creative in doing what we do, cheaper, faster, better. This is also the way we draw the youth in because they're technologically savvy. This is what they love to do. Bring them in and find a way to get them to do things like that. You know, the whole label of division, establishment, Tea Party, Liberty Caucus, that's the division in our party. That's what we got to get rid of. We've got to start looking at ourselves as family. I have a family, and yeah, we have redheaded stepchildren and weird uncles and everything, but we're still family. We have to push that message and remind people of it constantly. I don't know why anybody want to run for office. You know, you get beat up because if you're pushing voter ID, who's standing outside your office screaming? Second Amendment, illegal immigration, you know, pro-life. Why aren't you working on these issues? Because you can't do it all at one time. And yet they get beat up and they still go to work and do it, and thank the good Lord for it. Because they're willing to stand in the breach and take that abuse to ultimately do what's right for us. So let's look at the terminology. Let's look at the conversations that we're having and how we actually have them and what it's actually creating. Because we've got to start recruiting now for that next election cycle. And if all the people and the potential candidates are out there, you say, why we can't get anybody for Attorney General? Why? Why go get a job that's probably going to pay you less than you make in the civilian world just so you can go to work every day and get abuse from the public because you haven't pleased somebody? What kind of career choice is that? No, we can reshape this whole dialogue, and it starts here at the local level with us this fall in your local races, getting out there, supporting your candidates, and being positive behind them.
That's a great question, Steve, because those Council of State offices are very important, and we have not done a very good job. Number one is money. They're not sexy races. It's hard to raise money for them. That's where we could help because so few people are paying attention to those races. And the ballot drop is huge. They don't get nearly as many votes as whoever's at the top of the ticket. They don't have the name ID. It's really, really hard. Grassroots can do that. I can tell you I don't believe there's anything that a good grassroots movement can't do. It takes money to run any campaign. You've got to have some money. But you cannot buy the grassroots. Quick story, I went out to Texas and worked on the Ted Cruz campaign in the primary. It was the most awesome grassroots movement I have ever seen. 6 weeks out from that election, we were down by 30 points. On election night, he won by 9. In 6 weeks. Nobody heard of him before. He had no name ID. We had no money. His opponent was endorsed by Kay Bailey Hutchison, by the Bushes, by Rick Perry, everybody. Everybody who was anybody was behind him. Just this little group of ragtag people with our handmade signs standing on the road every day at rush hour doing our sign waves and making those phone calls. And it was an awesome victory. And he is my favorite senator today. He is making things happen in that Senate because he is definitely one of us. He was on the outside working. And I want to join Dave in saying that our elected officials, and I know many of our Republicans, they have the toughest job there is for a little bit of pay. And they do get hammered all the time. Heck, I hammer them all the time. So I know what they have to put up with. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. I am thankful that those guys feel called to do that, because it really has to be a calling, because it certainly is not, it's not a glamorous job, and it certainly is not well paid. So we have to get behind them and help them, but we do need to target some of these Council of State races, and we need to help some of those. And we had some great candidates this last time, and we did better. That's probably the best we've done, but we've got a lot of work to do in that area.
Real quickly, I worked with Ed Gilwood's campaign. He did the videos. Ed sent me to the furthest west place in North Carolina, Hayesville, North Carolina, 5.5 hours from Greensboro to speak for him one night. And so he had me on the road putting out signs and stuff of that nature. But getting back to the Council of State races, the Republican Party many times, for a group that's supposed to be so smart, do a lot of stupid things. And the thing about it is we don't use business practices that, I mean, I guarantee you there's a bunch of self-employed people in this room, or owners right now, and they're business people, and they look at the Republican Party and say, well, that's not good business. Why aren't they doing it? You know, what's the matter with them? Leadership goes in there, and you go down and you sit with the candidates, and I think that the state party should sit down with candidates in the Council of State. I tried to do it on my own. They wouldn't sit down with us, and I said, why don't you run as a team? Why don't you raise money as a team? Why don't you appear as a team? Why don't you put out newspaper ads, radio ads, and everything else as a team so that you can promote your name? You maximize the funds that you're spending, you maximize your return. And you do that by working as a team. Because the Democrats do that. And they raise money as a team, so why don't we do it? You see, the thing about it is it comes from leadership and going out there and sitting down with these people and saying, listen, we're going to raise money together. The chairman can say he's going to help you. The vice chairman can say that he's going to help you. You can arrange things all over the state to help them raise money. And then instead of hiring 5, 10 different consultants, you have 1 or 2 consultants, one to handle the media, one to handle the print, and one to handle run the road. So that you've got these people going out and presenting the whole slate. And then you run them as a slate, and then you train the people and educate them to go vote for them as a slate. You see, we don't do things smart a lot of times. And that's one of the things that just drives me crazy, because as a business owner, I look at it and say, there's an easier, faster way to do it. Why don't we just sit down together and do it? Thanks.
Try this again. There we go. Good work, Dave. You know, I had a conversation with Robert Watkins, who was running the auditor's race last year. Linda Goldman. Deborah Goldman. And they actually got together and they arranged for a bus to do a tour of North Carolina, because I tell you what, you know, I thought the 12th district was big, and then I'd run into one of these Council of State candidates and they'd talk about, you know, by the time they were getting to the meeting that I took an hour and a half to get to, they'd already been to 2 meetings and traveled 300-400 miles to get through their day. That is a rough race to to run here in North Carolina. This state is amazingly large when you start driving from Wilmington in the morning to Asheville in the afternoon. And we need to help them, but he got a bus together for them to make a run through the state, and he couldn't get the NCGOP or the RNC to throw in gas money. That's the ridiculousness of it and how extreme that it's gotten, because they had their candidates that they thought could win, and they were only supporting those candidates. And that's going to stop should I be elected to serve you as chair. I'm going to make sure that those races move forward. Unfortunately, Marcus has made a very good case for running as a team. The bad part about it is we are Republicans, and as such, we are individualists. And the herding of cats is easier than getting some of these candidates to run together. Yeah, and I've worked in that, so you understand. I've worked in that industry, and it's something. It's a great thing to do, and you got to watch where you draw that line about where they're going to work together and where they're going to be individual or where they're going to work separate. But it's definitely something. I mean, you all hear it, North Carolina is the shadow government, is the Council of State. And the other thing that I would like to do as chair is push the General Assembly to get rid of some of those elected positions. It'll take a constitutional amendment. I understand it's not easy, but to push towards some of those positions either being combined and or appointed so that we can cut down on that and go forward. And we can push it off so that it has an activation date far enough down the road that the Democrats may actually agree to it.
Okay, let's give these folks a great big